For the 16 plus years that I served as a state prison chaplain in this state before retiring a little over 5 years ago, one of my responsibilities was to serve death notices. It kind of worked like this. The phone call would come into the institution and would be forwarded to the chaplain's office, and I would pick up the phone and listen to the person on the other end tell me the bad news that they wanted delivered to their loved one inside the institution. The next thing I would do would be to go into the computer and find out if the person I was talking to was a member of the inmate's visit list. You see, we had all kind of people outside the fence using all kind of excuses to try to communicate to people inside the fence. So the first thing I had to do was clear the person on the outside. Then I would call the residential unit where the inmate was living and have the officer give the inmate a pass to come to the chapel to talk to the chaplain. Now, most inmates knew when they were notified to go see the chaplain that there was going to be some bad news. But when they arrived at my office, I would generally stand and greet them, and if I did not know them, I would say, good morning or good afternoon, I'm Chaplain Henry. Please have a seat, I have some bad news for you. I would wait for them to be seated, and then I would tell them, such and such a family member called and wanted me to let you know that I would name the loved one, has died, or they might be sick, or whatever the bad news was. Then I would have a silent pause and wait for the person to respond. I got all kinds of responses. Sometimes the person would just break down, and we would have a time of pastoral care, and I would have the person get themselves back together before we made the phone call that we were told to make to the family. Sometimes they would simply ask me some questions. I remember on one occasion, a young man came to my office, and I told him to sit down, and he just stood there and looked at me. So I told him what was going on, and without batting an eye, he looked at me and said, "Is that all?" And I said, "Yes." "Can I go now?" And I said, "Yes." And as soon as he cleared my office, I got on the phone and called the living unit and told the correctional officers that I had just given this inmate some bad news and they might want to keep an eye on him because a lot of times I knew that if they didn't ventilate there in my office, it was going to come out later and they could get in trouble. It was simply not cool in the prison to cry anywhere but in the chaplain's office. And so we would deal with that. So after we had gotten the news accomplished there, I would usually make call the family. We were due to give them at least a 5-minute phone call. Usually I would allow for 10 minutes, occasionally 15 minutes. Understood that you, the taxpayers, were paying for that telephone call. Well, Jesus knew that his death was approaching, and he needed to notify his loved ones, all the disciples, that his death was approaching. Jesus had been out teaching, he had been feeding the hungry, and he had been healing the sick. And then while he was walking with his disciples, he inquired with them about his public identity. Who do folks out there say that I am? And then, who do you say that I am? And he got several responses to that. And then he tells them, I got some bad news for you. I'm going to die. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to die, and after 3 days, I'm going to be resurrected. And I can imagine that Jesus probably felt as excited as any one of us would feel today if we knew that we were probably under surveillance as a candidate for death row. So this morning, as we look at several passages in the Gospel of Mark, I would like for us to consider the matter of spiritual encouragement and renewal, and the matter of renewing spiritual vision in the presence of discouragement. I firmly believe that Jesus experienced discouragement. When Jesus told the disciples his fate, Peter immediately took him aside and rebuked him, and was probably reflecting what some of the other disciples wanted to do. After all, often when we hear bad news, we go into denial as a part of the stages of grief. And Peter was certainly denying that this was going to happen. No, Jesus, it can't happen like that. It's not going to be that way. No! And he argues with Jesus. And Jesus, as I read the scriptures, senses an evil presence and turns around and rebukes Peter. Get behind me, Satan! Now, I don't think that Jesus was speaking in a calm voice. I think he was experiencing some real evil there. I mean, you wouldn't look to your best friend and offer them a cordial invitation to visit the theological place of eternal punishment if you weren't upset. Satan, get out of my way! Leave me alone! Jesus gave a direct order. And in the prison system, that meant you obey or you're going straight to the hole. Isolation. Jesus was upset. He rebuked Peter and told him where to go. And then Jesus admonishes the crowds. As I am reading the scriptures, the very next thing Jesus does is he gathers the crowds. And Jesus had been around the crowds and he knows what's going on. And I think he's still probably a bit upset. And he begins to say, you know, folks, we've been talking about this for several years. And if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to start learning how to deny yourself. Put yourself last. You've got to learn how to take up your cross. I'm not seeing that. I don't think Jesus is just calmly teaching today. I think he is full of anxiety about the fact that he's on his way to Jerusalem and he knows what's going to happen. You've got to learn how to lose your life. You folks are trying to do everything to make life better. You've got to lose yourself for my sake. And I also get the impression that some of you are not exactly proud to talk about the fact that you've been in my company. You're a little ashamed of me. So let me just tell you point blank. If you're ashamed of me, the Son of Man is going to be ashamed of you. I think that Jesus was a bit upset. Jesus is approaching Jerusalem, where he knows that he is going to confront the religious and the political authorities. And the disciples just don't get it. It seems like they never got it. We keep running into that. And the crowds are not seriously sacrificing or following. I believe that Jesus, in this time and place, was becoming discouraged. I can tell you that as a pastor, I have been there. I remember working one time for weeks to get a Christmas program in the church I was pastoring. We ended up bringing 100 people from the community into a sanctuary that generally had at best about 75 people on Sunday morning. We packed out the house. And our church members sat around and just kind of watched. And several weeks afterwards, the head honcho walks into a meeting. Pastor, none of this is doing this church any good. None of this is for this church. None of these people joined. I knew I was in trouble. Well, you know, we brought 100 people from the neighborhood into the church. How many of them did you meet? None of them. That's your job. That's what we're paying you to do. Jesus knew what it felt like to not have the congregation with him. I think Jesus got angry. I think that he was experiencing depression, which goes along with anger. And I think he was feeling a bit lonely. Now, I can imagine what some of you are thinking right now. Well, if Jesus was God, didn't that cover all the angry? Jesus wasn't supposed to get angry. Well, you know, we talk about the incarnation. That means that Jesus was human. And that takes us back to the identity issue of who is Jesus, which we have been debating for over 2,000 years. And I'm not going to chase that this morning. I'm going to refer you all to the Nicene Creed, which is in your hymnal, that was produced by the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century. I'll refer you to the Catholic Church, which is next door, that owns the Nicene Creed. I'm going to refer to you to a book by Bart Ehrman, who teaches at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, who wrote a book, How Jesus Became God. Now, I will tell you that he considers himself an agnostic. I think he's still a Christian, but he has the right to define himself as he so chooses. But I will also tell you that he comes out in a different position than the Council of Nicaea did. Now, the bottom line is that we still ask the question, who was Jesus? And so go and read, and if you still have questions, then we can sit down and talk about it. But I think that Jesus was operating out of his humanness, and he needed some encouragement. And so he pursued encouragement, and the next scripture that I'd like to look at is in the beginning of Mark chapter 9, and this is a scripture that Beth Short preached on several weeks ago, and she did an excellent job talking about the transfiguration and the mountaintop experience and the mysterious mystical experience that Jesus experienced there on that mountaintop. Now, one of the professors at my seminary who has commented on this, Culpeper, has said, along with Dominique Crossan, that you need to read this scripture like it's a parable. That means it's open to interpretation. And so, as we go through this, we recall that Jesus encountered two of his Jewish spiritual mentors, Moses and Elijah. Why Moses and Elijah? Who was Moses? Now, if you answer Charlton Heston, that is not the correct answer. Now, let me explain to some of those of you who are a bit younger than I am. People of my generation grew up with a movie called The Ten Commandments, in which Charlton Heston starred in the role of Moses. And there's absolutely no way that you can say Moses to me and I don't see Charlton Heston's face. I mean, that's just the way it is. But Charlton Heston was really not Moses. And but we recall that Moses was the guy that God confronted there at the burning bush and said, Moses, I want you to go back into Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. What? You got to be kidding, God, not me. I'm wanted for murder. There's a warrant out for my arrest. I can't go to Pharaoh. Moses, you the man. I want you to go and confront Pharaoh. Now, Moses was not a Jewish paying card-carrying member of the National Rifle Association, but God did equip him with an arsenal of 10 nasty plagues. You remember the flies and the locusts and the frogs, all that stuff, the river turned to blood. It was nasty. And it took all 10 of those plagues, and even then, Pharaoh tried to renege, followed them to the Red Sea, and I remember Moses lowered his staff, and they got a good Baptist baptism by immersion there in the Red Sea. After the children of Israel had already moved on to safety en route to the Promised Land. Now, Elijah, who was Elijah? Elijah was the prophet who confronted King Ahab. Not as well known as Moses, but King Ahab had all these lands, but he didn't own this vineyard that was owned by Naboth. Naboth had this gorgeous vineyard, and King Ahab wanted it, and he could not find a price that Naboth was willing to accept. And his wife Jezebel looked at him and said, "What are you, king or a woman?" And she got her hands involved in it and trumped up some charges and got Naboth stoned to death, and King Ahab ended up with the vineyard, which immediately prompted a visit from the prophet Elijah, who confronted him and says, "You're a sinner, you're guilty of murder, and you have stolen a piece of land from one of the little people. This is social injustice, and you're a bad king." At least we're told that King Ahab apologized. But see, Jesus knows that he's going to Jerusalem, and he knows that the temple is not exactly known for its ministries of social justice. Now, we're going to go there next week when I come back. I'll give you a hint. They were guilty of what Dean William Hull from my seminary called price gouging. That will be continued next week, so come back. What I think was going on here, and I have received some help from an Episcopal priest who teaches at a Methodist seminary, who just happens to be a member of a Native American tribe, has written a book called The Four Vision Quest of Jesus. And Dr. Charleston says here that this is the second of four vision quests of Jesus: the wilderness, and the Garden of Gethsemane, and the cross being the other three. And he says that in this situation, Jesus is on a vision quest. which he defines as a tool or a method for seeding back into the community persons who understand both the spiritual nature and life of their role in it. So Jesus goes to the mountain, and he brings to his image his mentors, Moses and Elijah. And he gets some help. Help me out here, guys. I got to go confront the authorities in Jerusalem. I know that you all have some experience in this. Tell me, how did you do it? Where did you get the courage to go and face the authorities? I've got to go and enter Jerusalem and face the authorities, and I've got to cleanse the temple of social oppression. I believe that in this experience, Jesus finds spiritual renewal. And when the disciples who are with him want to build little churches to honor them, Jesus says no. Beth, you were right. You got to go leave the mountain and go back down into the community and do the Lord's work. Jesus didn't want to do church. He wanted to do ministry. And so he continued with his healing ministry and enters Jerusalem ready to face his adversaries. I find some challenges in this scripture. First of all, I'm challenged to sometimes get the courage to confront religious authorities. Now, our church has some experience in that. You know, we've encountered the American Baptist Churches of Columbus, the Columbus Baptist Association, and we have told them, here are the people that we consider welcome to attend this church and participate in our programs. They disagreed, we confronted, and we went our own way. Having said that, we also need to get the courage to confront the political authorities. As I look out at this congregation, my guess is you're here because you feel safe here, especially some of you. But I've been around enough to know that when the service is over, some of you are going to go out and get in your car, and you're going to drive out the street behind us. And if you happen to look in your rearview mirror and you see a police car behind you, all of a sudden, you're not going to feel so safe. I have a friend in Cincinnati where I live who is pastor of one of the prominent African-American congregations in Cincinnati. And in fact, his name has been in the newspaper this week. And I remember not too many months ago, he looked at a group of us who were meeting in his congregation. And he says, where I come from, we know that the purpose of the police is to protect white people. I've had to struggle with that because I'm a white person, and I've worked for law enforcement, you know. But I've had to listen and learn. And the point is, if we're going to work to make people safe in our place of worship, we've got to also work to see that they're safe outside our place of worship. I find that the current media news that is reporting lack of support for people on the margins to be simply and literally overwhelming, frustrating, and discouraging. And I find myself being called by God to address the authorities in this case. God is calling, and we need a vision quest and a game plan. I believe that today you and I need spiritual encouragement and renewal to renew our spiritual vision in the presence of discouragement. God is calling. And as we sing our hymn of response, I will be down front to receive any who want to respond with any expression of God's call